Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ice-Burgh to Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. I know this isn't a normal posting day for Ice-Burgh to Go, but we did have some breaking news between the time that Tip of the Ice-Burgh, the full show, go check it out, came out earlier this morning, and this news that we received from Pittsburgh Penguins head coach Mike Sullivan. According to the Penguins head coach, PTO defenseman Mark Pysyk will be out, quote, longer term with a lower body injury. Of course, Pysyk in Pittsburgh on that PTO. He did miss all of last season due to an Achilles injury, a tough injury for players to come back from, especially a player of his age at his position. That was going to be the question. That's probably why he was brought in on a PTO instead of given a full-year contract. Unfortunate news for Mark Pysyk, who, from all intents and purposes, was apparently performing really well at Penguins training camp over the first couple of days. Had looked good, even notching a goal and an assist in one of the inter-squad scrimmages. Of course, when he came in, he was vying for that third-pairing spot on the right side. The team is now, with that, a little uncertain of what the future holds for Mark Pysyk, whose contract does not currently extend into the regular season. They did place him on the injured list, but it does appear that battle for the Penguins' third pairing is starting to get some answers, and unfortunately, this is not the way that anybody wanted to see an answer. Mark Pysyk, again, out longer term. What does this mean going forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins' third pairing? I mean, the injury to Pysyk, it clears a path for both Chad Ruhwedel and Ty Smith to make the NHL roster out of camp, something that Chad Ruhwedel has done the past several years, but the question did arise if Pysyk was going to be able to come in and take his spot, and from the early indications, it was a close battle between those two. But with Pysyk, of course, on the sideline now, that opens the door for a guy like Ty Smith to come up and battle Chad Ruhwedel one-on-one for that position, and potentially for both of them to make the NHL roster. The question's going to be, who of them starts? Right, Chad Ruhwedel last year, he played a decent amount of time, but he wasn't the Penguins' top option in that position. That went to Jan Rutta, and Ruhwedel played when Rutta was injured, but he wasn't their number one option for that specific position. And Ty Smith is somebody that, when the trade happened, he comes over to Pittsburgh. John Marino goes back to the New Jersey Devils, and of course, Marino, as we know, had a really good first season in New Jersey last year, while Ty Smith had to fight, scratch, and claw just to get to 9 games played at the NHL level, and only played because of injuries. So it's really an important year for him. This is an opportunity for him now to make the NHL roster. He hasn't been spectacular at Penguins training camp. He hasn't been bad, as we talked about on that full episode of Tip of the Ice-Burgh earlier today, but this is a chance for him to go out there and just try to beat Chad Ruhwedel. Because yes, there's other players. Libor Hayek is still here on a PTO. Mark Friedman is always in the background, ready to take a roster spot if somebody falters. They have other players like a Taylor Fedun, who played some games at the NHL level last season. But really, this injury narrows the focus to Ruhwedel and Ty Smith, and one of them is going to have to really underperform to be taken off the NHL roster before the beginning of the regular season. The question then becomes, of course, who starts next to P.O. Joseph. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention really quickly on this quick bonus edition of Ice-Burgh to Go. P.O. Joseph, I said before training camp, was my guy that I was predicting to come in, put his foot down, and just take his role and be the guy on the Penguins' third pairing on the left side. I predicted that he was going to come in with full confidence from last season, playing a full year in the NHL, and that's exactly what he's done. Head coach Mike Sullivan, when he was speaking to the media earlier today, said that POJ is, quote, light years ahead of where he was at this time last season. And that's from Penn's Inside Scoop. But light years is not a term that you should take lightly, considering that P.O. Joseph went on to have a pretty solid year in 2022. And I feel pretty good about his chances to make a massive leap in year 2 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's not going to have, as we've mentioned, that much of a heavy load to lift because the top 4 is going to do a lot of the work. P.O. Joseph is going to have to find his niche, which is probably going to be more penalty kill leaning than power play leaning, even with Letang and Carlson both on the Penguins' top power play unit, as Sullivan mentioned over the weekend. That's what they're going to try to do. Again, talked about that in the full episode, but the Spark Notes version of this, Pysyk out longer term, not sure what his future holds with the Penguins organization. His contract is a PTO, so it doesn't extend into the regular season. We'll see what they do with that, but a big opportunity here for Chad Ruhwedel and for Ty Smith to try to see who can outdo the other over the next 2 weeks, as puck drop is 14 days away against the Chicago Blackhawks. That is it for this bonus episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from.